Welcome to the Google Sheets training with Albuquerque Public Schools. We're going to be going over how to do Google Sheets today and going over all of the different components. Now, one of the first things you want to do before you get into Google is make sure that you are signed into your Google account by going to www.google.com. And when you're in that home screen right here, you're going to want to make sure that you sign in with your APS Google account, which is your name at aps.edu. You're also going to want to make sure that you are using your Chrome browser and that you are signed into the same account here on Chrome. If you have a colored icon right here next to your icon in the Chrome browser, you need to click on that arrow icon and update Chrome. If you see 3 dots, then you're updated and you're all ready to go. So with any type of Google tools, there are a variety of different ways to get to that tool. So for Google Sheets, we're going to start out with this Google Apps Launcher. We call this the waffle. It's right next to your icon. Click on that, and then you're going to find the Sheets icon right here. I'm going to click on Google Sheets, and that's going to open up the Google Sheets dashboard. From this dashboard, you're going to be able to get into the template gallery, and there is a variety of different Google Sheets templates that you can already use, or you can create a brand new blank Google Sheet. Now, another way that you can get into Google Sheets is, I'm going to go to a new tab, and I'm going to type in sheets.google.com, and it's going to take you right back into that Google Sheets space without having to go through the Google Apps Launcher. There's a couple other ways to get into Google Sheet. The other option is to go through your Drive. So I'm going to go to drive.google.com. And from your Drive, if you go to the plus sign and the new button, you can select Google Sheets this way, either a blank spreadsheet or from a template. The final way, if you don't want to use a template with Google Sheets, is you can go ahead and go to the address bar and put in Google Sheets.new, and you'll be able to create a brand new sheet. This works for any of the Google tools. If you type in docs.new or forms.new or slides.new, it will create a brand new blank document of that type. Google Sheets is very similar to Excel with Microsoft. So if in your Drive you have an Excel sheet and you want to open that using Google Sheets, I'm going to click on the file, and there's going to be a dark border around it to know that it is a different file type. And in the very middle, there's going to be a drop-down button that says Open With. I'm going to select Google Sheets, and it's going to take a little while to convert that over. And now this is opened as an Excel file. I know this because next to the file name, it is a .xlsx file, which means that it's a Microsoft Excel format. Google Sheets does a pretty good job of transferring over to Google, but there are going to be some features that will be dropped. If I go up here to view details, it's going to say that some conditional formatting will be removed. The other thing that you can do is go to File and save this as a Google Sheet as opposed to an Excel sheet. And now that Microsoft Excel tag is gone now when I go back to my Drive, I'm going to notice that there is a document with an X, which is the Excel version of the document, as well as the Google Sheets icon on the other version. So unlike other training videos that we have where we're going to create a brand new file and work from that, I've actually created a practice Google Sheet. The reason I've done this is because Google Sheets allows you to arrange, calculate, sort, or filter different types of data. So we're going to want a sheet that already has the data inside of it. If you copy this URL and add it to the address bar, you're going to get this screen here where it's going to ask you to make a copy. Click on Make a Copy, and you will have your own version of the Google Sheet in your Drive. So now we're inside the Google Sheets training document. My document might look a little bit different than yours because my screen is zoomed in, but it is the same file. Spreadsheets are organized as a grid where columns and rows intersect. A row is a horizontal set of cells right here that are labeled numerically. Columns are vertical sets of cells that are labeled alphabetically. A cell is a single point where a row and a column intersect. Now, this is very important because every cell has a name. The way that Google names their cells is they put the column letter first and the row number second. So I'm going to go to this yellow cell right here. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to type in the name of this cell, which would be A9. Practice clicking on the yellow cells and typing in the name of each cell. This is B5. Along with naming a single cell, Google Sheets also uses a cell range, which means that it is a range of cells across either a row or column or possibly both. The way that this is named is it's going to start with the first cell, which is D10, and it's going to continue over to E10 and F10. A range is actually going to be written as the first cell name separated by a colon and then the final cell. So for these three cells, it's going to be D10 colon F10 to show that this is the range of cells going from D10 over to F10. Now we're going to practice adding some text to our Google Sheet. We're going to click on the top cell here that is A2. And if you notice that an active cell has a blue border around it. While you're in that active cell, I'm going to type in my name. You can type in your name. And when you are done, you can enter it in a variety of ways. If you press the Enter key, you're going to move down. If I press the Tab key instead, I'm going to move to the right. From an active cell, you can also use the arrow keys to move in any direction, or you can click on any cell to jump to that cell directly. To get back into a cell that already has data, if you click on the cell once, so I'm going to click on my name again one time, it will highlight the entire cell and it will replace the entire set of data if I start typing. If I go back to a cell with data and I click twice instead of one time, I'm able to add to that cell, as opposed to replacing all of the data. Similar to a word processor, Google Sheets will allow you to format the text in a variety of different ways using the top toolbar. So on the top toolbar up here, I can change the text to bold, italic, strike through. I can change the color of the text. I can also change the style of the font, and I can change the text size. If I want to go back to the defaulted style of text, I can go up here in the Format menu and go to Clear Formatting, and it will go back to the original style. If I want to add an enter within a cell, I'm going to make sure I click on that cell twice, and you can use Control Enter, and you're going to be able to enter all the way down inside a cell. Let's talk about adding, deleting, and moving rows and columns. Let's start out with looking at rows. If you want to highlight an entire row, you can click on the number of that row, and it's going to highlight all of that row going across the entire document. If you want to highlight a variety of rows, if you click on that number, and you hold down the Command key or the Control key, depending on what type of device you have. And while you're still holding that key, you can click on the different row numbers and you can select multiple rows. If you want to select a list of rows, click on the very first row, select Shift on your keyboard, and then select the last row, and we'll select all of those rows in a list. If I have a row selected, I can hover over the number until a hand appears. I'm going to click on that and hold, and then I can move that row up and down to a different location. To add a row, while I select this row, I'm going to right click on it, and I can insert a row either above or below this row. I'm going to insert one above. To delete an entire row, you can right click and select delete row. You can also get to these tools by going to the edit menu or the insert menu. You can follow this exact same process with columns. Instead of selecting the number, you can select the letter and move them, right click to insert to the left or right, and right click to delete. Copying cell data is really important in Google Sheets because it helps configure things a little bit differently. So let's talk about how Google Sheets copies cell data. In the very first cell right here in A2, I'm going to type my name again, and I'm going to make sure that this cell is active because it has a blue border around it. Now in Google Sheets, you can still do the general Command or Control C, and you're going to notice that there is this sort of dotted outline of the active cell to show that it has been copied. I can click on another cell, do Control or Command V, and now it's going to show that that data has been copied. There's a variety of different ways for the data to be formatted when you paste it. There is a drop-down menu where you can paste only the values, or you can do the paste format only. I'm going to go back to my name, and there are some other ways to copy information. That is with this little blue square here in the bottom right corner. When I hover over this little blue square, it's going to create a crosshair. I can drag this information across a variety of cells. So if you see that I drug this to the right across 4 different cells and they are outlined in black, when I let my cursor go, it's going to copy that information across all of those cells. Now I'm going to use that crosshairs and I'm going to go down and copy this across columns. Now Google Sheets has the ability to create ordered or numbered lists based off of information it already knows. And so when it copies that information, it's not going to straight copy the cell. It's going to automatically create a list. I'm going to go to column A, cell 11, and I'm going to type in Monday. Once I've typed in Monday, I'm going to go over with tab or with my arrow key and go back to the cell to make it active. I'm going to click it and drag down, and you're going to notice that it's automatically going to create lists that are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it's going to start back over on Monday. This works for months as well. And drag that down. You can also create a numbered list with a word in front of it. So if I put student 1 and I drag this down, it's actually going to number automatically all of the numbers to the right, but still keep the word student in front of it. This really comes in handy when you are trying to do a formula, and we're going to talk about that later in this training. Now, Google Sheets is the name of the entire spreadsheet itself. Inside Google Sheets, there are tabs on the bottom, which are called individual sheets. On the bottom of Google Sheets, there is a plus sign in the bottom left where you can add a new sheet. If I click on that button, it's going to add a brand new sheet to the right. If I click on this sheet where it says sheet 8 here on this arrow, I'm going to have a menu bar that comes up. This menu bar is going to allow me to delete the sheet. I can duplicate a sheet and all of the data that's on it right next to it. I'm going to go back to that menu. I can actually send a copy of the sheet to a brand new spreadsheet or an existing different spreadsheet. I'm going to rename this sheet. Changing the color of the sheet is going to change the line on the bottom of the sheet. And you're going to notice that all of these sheets have a different color to them. I can protect this sheet, and this is going to allow me to set permissions for the different sheets, which means I can restrict who is able to edit or change any data on a specific sheet. I can also hide the sheet. Now, this is very important because when I click hide sheet, it doesn't completely hide the sheet where editors aren't going to be able to find it. All the editors of this sheet will still be able to get into this sheet. It's not viewed at the moment. Anyone who is in this sheet can go to view and go to hidden sheets and then reopen that hidden sheet. I can move the sheet to the right or the left. I can also click on the sheet and drag it to the position I want it to move as well. In the bottom left, there is this icon that says all sheets. You can actually click on the different sheets here. This is where coloring the sheets comes in handy. We're going to actually go on to the next Google Sheet so that way we can look at the different formatting options inside a Google Sheet. So we're going to click on this orange icon here for formatting, and we're going to be put into a brand new Google Sheet. The information on the rest of this document is going to look very familiar if you've ever read any of the Harry Potter series. It is one of the very few schools without getting into student privacy, because what better way to use a giant list of students? This is used for educational purposes, used only in a small part and portion, and there isn't anything that saying anything is bad of the original work. Anything that is pulled right off of the internet is actually going to be cited here as well. On this formatting sheet, we're going to be looking at formatting text as well as cells to make the information look a little bit better. On this sheet is a list of different creatures, and over here is the list of the definitions of what these creatures are. The first thing you're going to notice is that if I click on cell D3, the information in the cell is running all the way across back to this part of the Google Sheet. There are 3 different ways that Google Sheets puts in the long-running text inside a cell. This is called text wrapping. Up on the toolbar is text wrapping. If I click on the down arrow, I'm going to notice that there are 3 options: overflow, wrap, and clip. Google Sheets is going to default to overflow, which means that the data is actually kept in cell D3, but that's going to overflow all the way across. The problem with overflow is if you have a lot of data or a large list of information, when I click on cell E3 and I type something in here, it's going to cut off that information that is in cell D3. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go back to cell D3. I'm going to go here to text wrapping, and I'm going to choose clip. It's going to cut off that information. If I am in the active cell here on the function bar, I can read all of that information, but when I'm off that cell, it's going to be clipped off. The last option here on text wrapping is wrap the text. I'm going to have to go over here to the row and extend the row. So to change the size of a row, we're going to hover in between 2 different rows until a blue line appears. If I click on that blue line and drag it down, it's going to drag that information down. Since this information is really long, I don't want this going all the way down the page. I can extend the column width as well. So I'm going to go between column D and E, click on this column, and stretch it out pretty far so that all of that information fits right here in this row and column. I'm going to actually shrink that up a little bit. I went a little excessive there. Along with wrapping text, you can also change the alignment of text within particular cells. That is this icon right here next to text wrapping. I'm going to make sure I'm in this active cell. And when I click on this icon, I have the option to change the text to be on the top of the cell, in the middle of the cell, or on the bottom of the cell. I'm going to put this on the top of the cell. I can also change the horizontal alignment of text in a cell. I'm going to select this drop down. I can do left, center, or right. I'm going to keep that to the left. So there is a way to copy the formatting in a cell using this icon up here in the top left. This is the paint roller icon. If I click on the paint roller icon, and if I click on another cell, it's going to copy that formatting from this cell, which is D3, over to D4. So it's going to have that same alignment, text wrapping, and font. If I select the cell and use the paint roller again, and I drag and highlight more than one row or column, and when I let go, it's going to format all of those rows and columns like the cell I had picked. So I'm going to have you practice that on this practice cell. You go to a cell, format that cell how you would like. So I'm going to make this text bold. I'm going to change the font. You can change the alignment of the text. And then once you're happy with it, you can choose that paint roller, paint format icon, and then highlight the other rows that you want to change. Also adjust the column width and the row height if you would like. So feel free to pause this video and go ahead and practice using those tools. The information on our chart looks a lot better now that we have changed the formatting of the text. Now let's look at formatting the cells themselves so that way we can see the data even better. To do this, we're going to look at changing the border as well as the cell fill color. To change the border, I'm going to select all of the chart that I want to format, and then I'm going to go up here to this toolbar and click on this borders icon. Please note that borders will be formatted for the entire selected area. So when I click on borders, I can change the inner border lines in a specific way, and then I can change the individual outer border lines in a specific way. Over here on the right, you can change the border color as well as the line style. I'm going to change this color to be a dark red, and I'm going to make the line a lot heavier and I'm going to select this outer border icon, and you're going to notice that the outside border of my chart is going to be formatted in that way. I'm going to change the border color to be a different color, and you're going to notice that that's going to change the color now as well. So I'm going to click off of this, and I'm going to click back on to change the formatting of the inner borders to be different. Select a gray color to make that a much thinner line. I'm going to choose the inner borders, and now you can see that our cells that are individual are more pronounced. Another way to make information stand out is to change the cell color. So if I go over here, I'm going to select on Hippogriff in cell A3, go up to this paint dripping icon. This is the fill color icon, and you can select from a variety of different colors. So I'll choose this gray color, and that's going to change the background of the cell. I could go through and individually add the cell color, but if I go back to that paint format tool and I select it, I can actually change the formatting of all of these cells. Just like with the text, you can do that with fill color as well as border color. Google Sheets also has some formatting automatically built in. It's called alternating colors. So to best look at this, I'm going to select the entire chart again, and I'm going to remove those borders just so we can see how this works a little bit better. I'm going to clear borders. And up in the format menu, and in the format menu, just as a little side note, you can change the format of the text, do the alignment and text wrapping from this menu as well. But down here towards the bottom, we're going to look at alternating colors. I'm going to click on that. Another way that you can get to alternating colors is by clicking on the fill color icon, and towards the bottom there is the option that is alternating colors. And over here on the right, a window pane is going to open up. I'm going to apply this to this range, A1 to D12. You can choose to have a separate coloring for the header and footer. I don't have a footer, so I'm going to take that one off. And here is the different default styles and coloring that you can add. I'm going to select this one here, and you're going to notice that it has a different header color as well as alternating colors for each row. You can customize the different colors using these drop-down boxes as well. Once I am happy with the alternating colors format, I'm going to select done. Now my chart is formatted in that way. Now that we've formatted the writing and the cells, we're going to look at inserting some more things into a Google Sheet. Let's start with inserting an image. Select the cell you would like to insert the image into, and then go to the Insert menu. We've already looked at adding rows and columns and cells in the Insert menu. We're going to now be looking at these features down here on the bottom. I'm going to select Image, and there's two different ways that you can insert images into a Google Sheet. You can insert an image right in a cell or an image over the cell. I'm going to select Inside a Cell. And just like most Google tools, there's a variety of ways that you can pull that image into the file. You can upload it, use your camera by URL, using Google Photos, selecting from Google Drive, or doing a Google image search right from the file itself. When I select Google Image Search and I type in the file I want to look for, when I go here, all of these images are going to be copyright and fair use allowable. I'm going to select this image and select Insert, and that image is going to be put right here in this cell. When I go down to the next cell, it doesn't give me a whole lot of room to insert that image. So I'm going to want to make all of these rows the same height. To do that, I'm going to select the rows I want to change. Then I'm going to right click at the top row and go to Resize Rows. I'm going to specify a row height where they're all the same. And now all of those rows should be the same size for me to put my cell images into. Now that I've added images to these cells in column B, I want to add some checkboxes in column C for when I'm done learning about the different creatures. So I'm going to select all these rows in column C and go up to Insert and select Checkbox. That's going to create a box in each one of these cells that's going to be interactive. You can change the alignment of the cells using these same tools here up on the toolbar. Now, when I click on each individual cell, I can add a check mark to all the different cells that I am done with. Another thing that you can add into the Google Sheet is a hyperlink. Just like docs and slides and forms, you can add a hyperlink to any of these tools. So here on column D, row 6, so that's D6, I haven't added a description for a Yeti. But let's say you do not want to add a description, you just want to add a hyperlink to an outside source. So I'm going to select this cell Then I'm going to want to go up to a new tab, and I'm going to want to find the site with the information I'm looking for. And now that's going to become an active link inside this Google Sheet. Now we're going to look at inserting a comment inside a sheet. I'm going to select a cell I would like to make the comment about, and then I'm going to go up to the Insert menu and select Comment. A comment is going to be for different collaborators inside the same document to add notes or suggestions or questions about what is in the file. So I'm going to make a comment about not finding a picture for this particular creature. And if you want to leave a comment for a specific person, you can use the @ sign and then start typing in their email. That email should come up, and then there's going to be a specific note sent to that person. I can click on this box to assign this specifically to that person, which means that this email will be sent a notification about the comment inside this file. I'm going to select Assign. If I don't want to assign it, I'm just going to select Comment. Now inside the sheet on the bottom tab, you're going to see that there is one comment inside this particular sheet. To find the comment, I can hover over this cell that has a flag up here in the top right corner. And when I hover over this, it's going to bring up the comment. I can resolve the comment once it is complete. And up here in the top right next to the share button, there is a comment history button. So if I click on this button, I can see the history of all the comments that have been added to this sheet. You can change the share permissions on a Google Sheet where you can invite someone to come and be an editor or a commenter on your sheet. This allows you to collaborate with others in real time. Up in the top right corner, there is a green share button. Click on that share button, and you're going to type in the name or email of the person you want to share the file with, who is in the APS domain. You can also share this with people who are outside of the APS domain. On the right, you can choose how this person can interact with this file. They can be an editor and make all changes to the file, a commenter only, which allows them to leave comments, or a viewer where the file's view only. I can go over here to the message and add a message, and this will be sent if you keep this notification box checked as an email. You can turn this off if you don't want to send an email and just share it directly. Select Share, and now this person has been added as a collaborator on this document. I'm now in the file of the person that I shared the file with, which will be found in their Shared With Me drive. If I click on the file and I type in the cell, I'm going to go back to the original document, which is actually in my file, and I'm going to see that this cell here is outlined in a different color. And if I hover over it, I can see which collaborator is in that cell. If I go up here in the top of the file, I can also see the icon of the person who is collaborating on this document as well. When I click Enter, I'm going to see that change get made right here in the Google Sheet. If you're sharing a file, it might be a little daunting because changes in Google Sheets save automatically. So if you notice here in the top, it says all changes saved in Drive. There is an option in most Google apps and in Google Sheets as well where you can look at the version history inside a document. If you go up to File and go down to Version History, then go to See Version History, it's going to open a window here on the right, which will allow you to see all of the different versions that have been created in a Google Sheet. So if I go to this drop-down arrow right here, and each person will be assigned a different color next to their name, and you can see all of the different changes that have been made by those specific people. If you want to restore a specific version that was from the past, you can restore that version. Or if you would like to keep multiple copies of the document, but in different states of how it has been changed, you can go here to the right to More Actions, and you can name a particular version of the file, or you can make a copy of that file and have various copies. To leave version history, go up onto the arrow and go to the back button, and that will take you back to the live Google Sheet. I think our Google Sheet right here looks really good for formatting our particular chart. Hopefully you followed along and you have all of this formatting done in any form that you've liked. We're going to be moving on to filtering. So here on the bottom, I'm going to select the green tab for filtering information. It has a list of students with their first names and last names, which house they belong to. So if I go over here to this data, we're going to look at filtering and sorting all of this data. It's really easy to sort data in Google Sheets. If I go over to a column and I click on it, here on the right, there is a caret drop down. And if I select that, it's going to give me the option to sort. This is going to allow the entire sheet to be sorted in alphabetical order or in ascending or descending order if there is a number for the entire sheet based on information in that column. All of these last names are not in alphabetical order. And if I go here to this sort option and I sort it from A to Z, then all of the cells are going to be in alphabetical order. What you're also going to notice is that here is the header of this page. Then this information is going to be sorted as well as all of the names, which we don't want to have happen. So to change this, I'm going to go back to that undo arrow up at the top and undo our sorting. It's going to put our header options up here on the top. What I want to do is freeze the information that is here in this row. Click on the 1 to highlight this row, and we're going to go to view, and there's an option that says freeze. In freeze, I can freeze a number of rows, 1 or 2, or up to a specific row that's been highlighted or selected. I can do the same thing for column information as well. I'm going to select one row and I'm going to freeze that. And now if I scroll through information, you're going to notice that the first row is going to stay frozen and it's not going to change. But now when I select the column and I sort the information like we did before, the header is going to stay frozen and all of the other information is going to be sorted. The other way that you can freeze cells is if you hover over this darker line and you click on it and move it, you can actually freeze cells this way as well. So if I select all of this information and I go up to data, I can sort by range. Now I want to make sure to put that the data does have a header row, and I can sort by last name, and then I can add another sort column. So I can sort by last name and then sort the information by house in different order. So if I select sort, it's going to sort by last name, but then it's also going to have all of the people who have that specific last name in order alphabetically as well. With conditional formatting, it's going to change the look of a cell so that way you can see the data quickly. I'm going to select the Defense Against the Dark Arts column here and then go up to the Format menu on the toolbar and choose Conditional Formatting, or you can go to the fill icon and on the bottom under the colors you can select Conditional Formatting as well. With conditional formatting, you can change the information in two different ways, either as a single color based on a condition or in a color scale. With a single color, you can format the cells in all of these different ways. If the cell has text that contains a specific word or starts with specific letters, you can put if there is specific dates and times, or based on the value that is inside the actual cell itself. Or you can change this on a color scale. So I'm going to select color scale, and you can have some rules based on the information. Since I want to look at the range of the grades that the students have got, I'm going to set a minimum and maximum value. Since I have this information in percents, I'm going to select percent in 0. And on the fill icon here on the right, you can change the color. So I'm going to make the minimum value be red. The midpoint percentage value is 50%. I'm going to make yellowish orange color. And for the maximum value, which is going to be 100%, I'm going to change this and make it green. So now you see the color scale going from red at the lowest value, and then it will pick those median colors automatically set between those two colors, and that's going to move up to the highest value, which is green. I'm going to select done and close out this menu. If you look at this information here, the higher grades are darker and that the lower grades are going to be that red color. To show you easier, I'm going to use what we just learned previously and sort this information here, or from highest to lowest. And now you can see that the higher grades are going to be in a gradient from that green and then to red. We've looked at sorting data. Now we're going to look at using filters. Before we create filters, we're going to want to select this row up here on the top and make sure, if you haven't done this already, to freeze that row so that way the filters will be connected to that first header. Over here on the top right, and it might be extended out on your screen, but mine's zoomed in a little bit, you're going to look for this icon that looks sort of like a funnel to create a filter. Click on that icon. Now the cells that have data in them are going to be highlighted across the document. I'm going to click on that first cell just to get out of that window. And you're going to notice next to those header icons, there is a small green upside down triangle. This is the filter. So if I select and click on that green filter, I can filter the information in different ways. I can filter this by color if there's conditional formatting present. I can filter this by condition, which are the same types of conditions that were available for the conditional formatting. And I can filter by values, which is what we're going to look at right now. When you create a Google Sheet, it will automatically update every single value that exists in that column. So every time I put in a word, it's automatically going to put every unique version of that information here as a filtering option. Since I've typed in Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, I'm going to be able to filter by that data. So I didn't have to put that in. It's automatically done by Sheets. I'm going to clear all of this data, and I only want to look at one specific type of data in particular. So if I select Gryffindor and I hit OK, this filtering icon is going to darken and look like a funnel, and all the information that's going to be present on the screen is only the Gryffindor information. I can change this and do Ravenclaw, and now only that information is going to be present. With filtering options, you can filter more than one type of data at once. You can also filter across more than one column. So if I want to see the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff students who have a grade of more than 80%, it will continually filter out all of that information. To make sure that you get your data back, select all on all of the filters that you've created. If you have filtered information that you toggle back and forth between often, instead of going through filter, you can create a filter view. Over here on the filter icon, there is a small drop-down menu, and I'm able to create a new filter view. I have 3 filter views that have already been created. So the filter views get put here after they've been named. So if I select Gryffindor, it's going to automatically filter out that information. Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw. If you notice in a filtered view, the outline of the Google Sheet is going to be dark black. To get out of filter view, you just select this X here, and it's going to take you back to that original data. So to create a filter view, I'm going to go to the drop down and I'm going to select create a new filter view. You're going to know you're in that filter view because of the dark outline. Now I'm going to filter the data the way I want it to be saved. So here I'm going to select Slytherin because that's the only one that we don't have. I'm going to select OK. And up here on the top, I'm going to name this filter view. And here over on the right in this cog, this is how I'm able to rename a filter view, update the range, duplicate this filter, or delete this filter. Now, if I close this filter view, I can get to the filter view using this drop down, or I can go up to data and I can look at the filter views this way as well. So take some time filtering out different data and information on this Google Sheet. Another way to add filters to the data is by creating a slicer. Slicers are great ways for other people to filter out your information in a visual way if you were trying to share a Google Sheet with a lot of chart and graphs or information, and they can filter through that data quickly. To add a slicer, we're going to select the information we want to add. So I'm going to add this entire range. And then in the data drop-down menu, I'm going to select the slicer option. This is what the slicer looks like. It's going to automatically pull any of those header filter options here as the options for the slicer. Since we've been using house, I'm going to select house. I can customize the look of the slicer by changing the title, font, text color, and background color as well if I want to. I'm going to close out of this window pane, and now I can click on this slicer and actually drag it to anywhere on the Google Sheet I would like it to be. And I can select the filters here by clicking on this left soft icon or by choosing this drop-down menu as well. And just like it was in the filter view previously, I'm able to select certain data that I want to filter the information by. If you don't want to have the slicer anymore, you can select these three dots on the More menu. You can edit, copy, or delete. Another way that you can look at large data sets is by using a pivot table. This isn't a huge amount of data, but we can see how a pivot table functions. I'm going to go up to the data drop-down menu and select pivot table. It's going to create a brand new sheet. So down here, it's going to say pivot table 1. And over here on the right, it will offer you some suggestions. So let's look at the average score for each curricular activity. It's going to automatically put that information in these sections. So I have extracurricular activity right here using the values of DADA and their averages. I'm going to select the back arrow and let's look at some other suggestions. Last name by graduating year, or I can do the first name for how many people are in each house. You can create your own pivot tables by clicking these add buttons. So on the rows, I want to look at the house information. So here's all the different houses. And over here on values, I'm going to say I want to know how many people are taking extracurricular activities based in each house. And it's going to calculate that automatically. Pivot tables are a great way to look up and find information in large sets of data. If you want to make sure that a cell in a sheet has specific information, or even to create a drop-down that allows only certain types of information to be inputted into a cell, you're going to use something called data validation. So here on our header, we're going to call this wands, type of wands. And we're going to create a drop down with the different options here in the column. So I'm going to select this column, and then up here on the data menu, I'm going to select data validation. With data validation, there are some different criteria that you can do. We're going to be creating a list today, but let's go over some of the other options. We can create a list from a range, which is going to pull a specific chart or information on a different range in a Google Sheet to add that list. We're going to look at list of items in a moment, but you can have a number. You can add text that contains certain information. This is great if you want to put in information such as a URL or email address and not allow any other type of text. You can have a date, custom formula, or this is how you can also insert checkboxes. We're going to be looking at a list of items. Here you're going to put any items that are separated by a comma. Going along with the theme, I've added 5 different types of wands. You can add anything you would like as a list and just make sure you separate the list of items with commas. I'm going to select save, and now you're going to notice that there is a drop down here on each one of these cells. If I select the first cell and use the drop down, I'm only able to pick from those 5 specific items on the list. Let's finish up going to data up here in the menu bar and look at some of the options we haven't looked at yet. So up here, we've looked at sorting and sheeting columns and information. We've already looked at filter views and slicers, as well as data validation and pivot tables. One of the options we haven't looked at yet is naming a range of cells. So what you can do is you can add a range of cells and give it a particular name. So that way, when we are creating functions and formulas, which we're going to learn about on the next tab, you can just put in the name instead of putting in the cell range every time into a formula. If I wanted to select this range here and then give it the name of houses here, and so anytime I put in a formula, I don't need to put in the C2 to C29. I can just put in houses each time. Google Sheets also allows you to do protected sheets and ranges, which allows you to set sharing permissions either across an entire range of cells or an entire sheet that you choose within the Google Sheet. I can set permissions where I can show a warning or restrict who can edit this range versus the rest of the Google Sheet. You're going to see that the bottom of the sheet that is protected, there's going to be a locked symbol. You can remove duplicates or trim the white space that is around the sheet that is extra information. Another option is to group cells, columns, or rows together So I'm going to go back to the information that is all of the grades here, and I'm going to highlight them all, go to data, and group these columns together. There's going to be a grayed out area here on the top with a minus sign, which allows you to shrink that information if you don't want it to be visible, and then you can expand it out when you want it to be shown. Right click and remove that group. We are now in our last tab here in our Google Sheets, which we're going to be looking at functions and formulas in a Google Sheet. This has been configured sort of like a grade book for students in a Defense Against the Dark Arts class with all of these individual grades that have been calculated for the student. Before we start calculating formulas and functions, let's talk about some of the vocabulary that I'll be using when we go over this. So let's talk about the difference between a formula and a function. I'm going to go down here to this practice box here on this sheet. Now, a formula is used to perform a calculation such as adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing inside a sheet itself. Google Sheets functions almost like a calculator where it will automatically perform these calculations using the different cells. In order to do this, Google Sheets is going to need a math operator. Math operators are a little bit different. So if you want to add, you're going to use the plus sign. To subtract, you're going to use the minus sign. If you are going to multiply, you're going to want to use the Shift 8 key where it's going to be the star key. And to divide, you're going to use the backslash key. So you don't need to add these to this chart. It was just to show you how to do it. And now we're going to talk a little bit about functions in a bit, but functions differ because they're going to actually have a predefined formula that performs calculations using a particular tag. So they're going to use things such as sum or average or count if, and that's how it's going to pull in that data using that function. The important thing to remember about using functions in Google Sheets is you're going to have to look at particular cell references or cell ranges. So if I want to reference a particular set of data, we're going to have to click on it and drag across to get that entire range of data as a cell reference. That way, if any of the data inside the specific cells changes, it will automatically update that information. So down here on this practice space right here, we're going to practice creating a formula. So up here on the first top part with number, you can put in a number. And on the bottom part here, you're going to add another number. So I'm going to put 25 and 5 as my numbers. To create a formula, you're going to want to start with the equal sign. The equal sign in Google Sheets is automatically going to tell the sheet that this is something you constantly calculate, so it knows that it needs to calculate it. Now I'm going to want to go back and get the cell address of the cells I want to use. So I'm going to click up here on the top number on C29 and use 25. Now if you notice down here, it's going to automatically show that this number is going to be that first cell reference. Let's start with adding. So I'm going to add that plus sign because that is our mathematical operator. And now I'm going to select the cell underneath this, which is going to be C30 right here. So it's referencing that cell. And when I enter, it's going to automatically calculate the addition of C29 and C30 to make 30. The cell itself is only going to have the numerical answer. But if I click on the cell once, it's going to show that formula up here equals C29 plus C30. And if I click on this twice, I'm able to edit the text information. Instead of having a plus sign, let's change it to minus. And you're going to see that that answer is going to change. So take some time and use different mathematical operators like multiplication and division to see how a formula works. Because I've used cell references here, if I change any information in the cells themselves, you're going to notice that the formula is automatically going to be updated because I used a cell reference instead of numbers. So take some time using the Google Sheets formula option to practice creating formulas here in this space. So now let's look at using functions with this particular set of information as opposed to using formulas. So before we had put the equal sign and then the cell references automatically with adding and subtracting mathematical operator icons. Now we're going to use functions to do the same thing. You always start a function just like you do with a formula with the equal sign. But instead of starting with numbers, we're going to start with something called a function tag. There's multiple function tags in Google Sheets that you can use. For addition, we're going to use the word sum. When I start typing, it's going to show me all of the different mathematical function tags that I could use at the beginning of this particular function. Once you've selected which one you want, you're going to trigger the cell reference by putting a parentheses. So I want open parentheses, and here it's going to create a drop-down menu that's going to help walk you through each of the different functions. Here is an example to show you the types of information you can put in this particular function. I can put a range or two separate values. I'm going to click on 25 and drag down to the 5 in cells C29 and C30. And you're going to see that it's going to pull from that range. When I've added all my cell references, I'm going to do a close parentheses and select enter, and it's automatically going to calculate that information. The cells don't need to be next to each other. They can be spread out through the entire document. Now, I've tried addition, so let's look at subtraction. With subtraction, you're going to use the word minus. If I keep this the same way that I had before, you're going to notice an error message. So I'm going to click off, and it's going to have NA, there is an error. When there becomes an error, it will usually give you some information to tell you what the problem was. I have the wrong number of arguments. So if I look here at the cell reference and I click on it, there isn't an option to do a range of data. It has to be information that's separated by commas. So I want to take this colon and use a comma instead to separate the information. So I want to take the first cell and subtract the second cell. So I need to use commas instead of a range. Now that function should work. This is the same format for minus, multiply, as well as divide. We're going to want to use that comma instead. So those drop-down menus can really help you out for that type of information. Now that we've learned the difference between a function and a formula, let's scroll up to the top of this Google Sheet and look at some practical ways that we can use this. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out an average for these percentage grades right here in our Google Sheet. One of the things we haven't talked about is formatting the information in each cell so that way it's all the same. In this case, you see that this cell reference right here has 2 decimal points while this reference only has 1 decimal point. So I want to format these numbers. So I'm going to highlight this range right here and go up to the top and go to Format. Google Sheets has a variety of different number formats that you can use. Plain text, regular numbers, percentages. You can look at information in an accounting format with currency, dates and time numbers, as well as more formats here that you can create for currencies and other custom number formatting. You can change the number formatting here, or in the toolbar in this area right here is where all of the different number formatting can take place. I can automatically format as currency, percentages, and here's where I can decrease or increase the decimal places. And here's where I can have a drop down of all of those different number formats. I'm going to decrease the decimal spaces by 2. And now I have the percentages in the same format as the other ones. So in this cell right here in L4, I'm going to create a function to create an average of the student's grade. Put equal. We're going to type out the word average that will calculate an average of a data set. Open parentheses. And here you're going to see that it can do a range or multiple values. I'm going to select the first cell and drag across, and you're going to see that it selects cells E4 colon to K4 and do close parentheses, and that's going to give us our average. Since students were able to earn extra credit, they have some sets and scores that are higher than 100%. If I go here, I can copy this formula and function all the way down in each one of these rows, but you don't need to do that in Google Sheets. There's a really easy way to copy this information. Using that blue drop down right here, using that blue square in the bottom right corner, I'm going to click on this and then I'm going to drag the formula down to copy it all the way down to the bottom in the last person. This will create something called a relative reference formula. This means that Google Sheets will automatically change the cell reference for each of the functions that's created. So if I click on this cell right here, you're going to see that Google Sheets is automatically going to copy that next row for that average. So if I click on this one, it's going to be in the next row, and this one's going to be in the next row. So it automatically is going to calculate that reference going down. I can take this reference and copy it and put it over to this cell right here. And you're going to notice that if I click on it, it's going to take the average here of the number that starts right next to the percent. So if you do copy a text over, or if you do copy a function over going across a row, you may have to reformat that function. So now I'm going to use the equal sign instead, select average, and then make sure I highlight the exact range I want, close parentheses, and now you're going to see that it comes up with that correct information, but I can drag down across a column. So in your Google Sheet, go ahead and create an average score for each one of these classes in the Google Sheet. If you notice in your Google Sheet that it automatically updated the cell next to the percent, saying what a number grade could possibly be for that student, this is using a formula called a VLOOKUP formula. So I'm going to click on this cell here so you can see the actual function already created. But the reason I wanted to use this function right here is because this is called an absolute cell reference. There may be times you do not want a cell reference to automatically change when you're going down the rows. You don't want it to automatically create that relative referencing for you. So in order to do this, you're going to want to create an absolute cell reference. You create an absolute cell reference by using a $ in front of the cells you don't want to be copied going down. So first, let's explain this formula really quick. VLOOKUP, or vertical lookup, means that we'll search up and down a range of data for a specific amount of information. So what this is going to do is it's going to look up a number. That's this cell L4. It's going to look up this cell here, and it's going to match this cell to a specific range of data. The range of data is actually found down here on the same Google Sheet in this grade scale. So it says if the score is between a 0 and a 50, it's going to give a 1. If the score is between a 50 and a 76, it's going to assign that score a 2. And if the score is between a 76 and a 94, it will be a 3, and higher than 94 is going to be a 4. Now the index means which side of the range here are we going to use? Are we going to use the percent side on the column 1? Are we going to use the right side with the numbers in column 2? So since we put number 2, the second column here in the chart. Now, if I had taken this actual formula and drug it down, it would keep moving that reference down each one of these rows, and it wouldn't pull it from this exact data. So we need to keep this data as an absolute reference. So instead of putting the range of Y30 to Z33, so if you look here, this is cell Y30 to cell Z33, we're going to put $ in front of it. So $ in front of the Y, $ in front of the 30, $ in front of the Z, $ in front of the 33. And then when we take this formula up here in the top cell and we drag it all the way down, it's going to keep that same chart each time you drag it down. It's going to take the cell next to it to the left, but the chart information is always going to stay the same. So when you are creating an absolute cell reference, if you want to have a column and row stay the same, you're going to want to put the $ in front of the column reference as well as the row reference. If you want to just keep the row not changing, then you're going to want to keep the column without any $ and put the dollar sign in front of the number or the row reference. Same thing, but opposite with using just a column. You're going to want to put a dollar sign in front of the column reference, but keep the row reference without any type of dollar sign. So this is how you use the information in a function for an absolute reference. There are a variety of different functions that you can use, and Google has some of them built in using their function icon in the toolbar. I'm going to scroll down to this bottom area here, and I want to count how many students received ones, how many students received twos, etc. In order to do this, to create a function, I have to use an equal sign. Up in the top toolbar next to the filter icon is the function icon. When I click on this, there is a large drop down of all of the different functions that are available to use in Google Sheets. I can look up all of the functions here. There is a lot of them. Or I can choose to look at different filtered versions of them. Down here, if I scroll all the way to the bottom to the Learn More option and I click it, I'm going to be taken to the entire Google Sheets function list. So you can actually filter by keywords to see how a function works. And then you can go to each different particular type of functions and click on the Learn More button to learn how you can use that function in a specific sheet of data. In this case, I want to use a counting type of function, which is mathematical. So I'm going to go down to the math option and I'm going to look for count if, because I want to count if a certain number shows up in a list or a range. When I click on this, it's going to automatically give me those parenthesis options. If I click on the inside of it to add data, and you're going to notice a question mark here on the left, I can turn on the formula helper this way to show me how I should format that particular function. I'm going to put the range of data first, which is this data set. Then I'm going to put what the criteria is. So if you notice, this criteria is in quotation marks, and I can use the greater than, less than, or equal to sign. So I want to say this is equal to, so I'm going to say this is equal to the number 1, close quotation marks, and I'm going to select enter. Now it counted how many times the students received a 1. I'm going to repeat creating this function for the rest of the numbers. If you notice, as I'm creating these functions for the cell M30, it's actually going to move that cell around on the screen. I can see where I'm at in creating this function without having to go back to M30 repeatedly. I just completed that last function, and now I can see how many people got each score. The bottom one is a sum of all of these numbers to make sure that all students in the classroom, all 23, have been accounted for. So now you can take some time using this Google Sheet. You can add an average here for each student's grades, all of the different classes by selecting a cell and then using the Command key to select more than one cell across a large space. It's either Command or Control, depending on what device you use, and then that will create the average. You can use that drop down to find the average for all students. You can use the conditional formatting option that we had used before to look at those grades easier. Use the freezing a pane option here on the top and sort this list by student names. So go ahead and spend some time using functions and formulas and other tools that we have learned in Google Sheets in this sheet. We have a lot of great data and information in our Google Sheets, and we might want to look at this data in a chart form to look at it a little bit easier in a visual representation. There are 2 different ways you can look at adding a chart into this sheet using the information. You can either select the data before you create the chart, or Google Sheets sometimes has a pretty good understanding of a basis for what chart to use. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to Insert here on the menu and then go to Chart. And there will more than likely be a pretty good chart set up for the grades for the students received for their different subjects, which includes the 1, 2, 3, or 4 grade. If you notice here at the end, it's actually taken some information I don't want. So over here on the right is the menu for the options for this chart. So if I see the data range, I see that it's pulled the names from column C1 all the way to column C33 down on that row. And I don't want to go all the way down to row 33 here because this is going to be past the data that I want. So I'm going to look here and see that it's actually going to be row 26 is where I want to end that data. So going back to the pane here, the chart is still here. I can go to the 3 dots here and edit this chart, and that'll bring me back to that pane. I'm going to change all of these 33s to 26. And now that I've done that, when I click off of this, you're going to notice that it has updated that data where it actually ends at Ron's grades right here. There are some other changes that you can make. You can change the chart type here on this dropdown. There are a variety of different charts. Realize that Google does try and pull the best type of chart for this data. But if we click on one of these line charts, we can make this a area chart or a bar graph. But I'm going to go ahead and go back and stick to the first stacked column. The stacking can be a variety of different ways. I'm going to select standard. And here's where you can rename those different accesses in series. So I do want to keep this as first name. I can keep the series as these are the series that it's going to pull from those headers. So you can select here and add some different options for series if you would like. You can switch rows and columns. I'm going to use row 1 here as the headers and column C as the different labels. I can go to this tab up here and change and customize this chart a little bit. I can change the background color. I can change the chart border color. I can also make this 3D as a 3D option. I can also change the title text. So up here, instead of saying the name of the classes, I could say student overall grades, and I can also change the title format, font, and color. Here on the series options, I can actually add those data points. So when I click add, I'm going to select this for a specific student, select OK. And here I can change that student's color of their grade so you can have that specific data point stand out a little bit more. If you don't want to do that, you can select delete. You can also add data labels for all students, so you can see the number for each one of those different classes that the student received. You can also look at total data labels or a trend line for all of the data through the format data points. Here you can change the legend and change the text color. In the horizontal axis, you can flip between the order of the horizontal axis, change to what degree the horizontal axis labels are tilted. Here you can configure the vertical axis, making the minimum and maximum numbers a little bit different values. So change the scale factor and the number format. So turn off or on the grid lines on top of the chart. I have my chart formatted how I would like it to be. So I'm going to close this window pane. And over here on the chart, I can move this chart anywhere on the screen, but I would prefer to have this information in an entirely different sheet all on its own. So up here in the right, I'm going to use these 3 dots and I'm going to move this chart to its own sheet. Now this chart is going to show up as a completely different sheet option here on the bottom. I can see all of the students' grades and I can see how it's been configured in a chart. Since this chart is also created in Google Sheets, it can be interactive if it has been sent as a link. So if I hover over any of these specific data points, I can see the name of the student and what these data points originate from. I do have some options here where I can copy, edit, publish, or download this chart. I can also delete this chart. You can create your own chart in this Google Sheet, but you can also use something called the Google Sheets Explorer tool, which will allow you to look at data in a variety of different ways, including charts and graphs, by asking a question or by looking at some of the suggestions that Google is offering. The Explorer tool is down here in the bottom right, and when I click on that Explorer tool, it's going to open up another window pane, and it's going to allow you to ask questions about this data. It's going to offer some options here where I can look at the median of creatures, which is a 3. I can look at the correlation of the werewolves grade versus the Imperious curse grade, and that'll give me a chart, and I can select different types of charts. This is going to be a scatter plot here, or I can look at a histogram of all of the creature grades. When I scroll down here in the Explorer tool, I'm actually able to see some different analysis that the Google Sheets has done for me, and I can drag this down looking at what all of the formulas are and functions that Google Sheets has already automatically configured. I can ask a question about this data. So if I want to compare the curses and hexes percent by the creatures percent of score using the student's first name, I can select this and it's going to pull up a chart that I can insert right into this sheet where I can look here and see all of the information that is available. And it will take all of that original data and compare those specific scores on a brand new Google Sheet. To view the function sheet that I had before, I can go back and look up that hidden sheet. And I have the chart right here to show all of the different scores for each student. So take some time and go to the Google Explore tool here on the bottom right and try asking some different questions about this data. Let's look at some examples and options for ways you can use Google Sheets as a teacher, or if you want to use it to organize information as an admin. In this Google Sheet, you can create a resource document where you can collect information or resources and keep track of that information in a Google Sheet. Looking at the Google Sheet we've already created as well, you can use a Google Sheet as a grade book where you can keep track of different classes and information for students. On the bottom, you can use the sheet tabs for different subject areas or different content areas. You can use Google Sheets as a to-do list or a checkoff list. This is great for students who need help with executive functions, getting ready at the end of the school day, or making sure they have all of their items. So when students click on this digital version of a task list or a to-do list or a list of items they need to have, you can continually duplicate and make a copy of this to keep track of data. This is a template that is available in the Google Sheets templates. Another option is to use this as an assignment tracker to follow along with a lot more of the different tasks that can be used for a larger project or for an assignment or even for different center activities. So students can select the specific subject that they're going to be completing, and then they can mark the status of that particular activity. Google Sheets can also be used to track attendance. In this case, this is a template that was available in Google Sheets templates where you can mark if a student was present or absent or unexcused or late, and it will automatically calculate that total over here on the right. You can use the same type of document to mark down homework or checked out items in the classroom, and the data will be automatically calculated here on the right. This is also a template available in Google Sheets that is a schedule. This is a daily schedule that is also available in Google Sheets. It has the week filled out with the information for that week of school. You can update this calendar automatically by changing the week here on the Google Sheet, which will allow this embedded schedule to constantly be updated so it can be kept on a website for parents to have access to. There is another template that is available in Google Sheets called a project timeline. This is great to create unit plans or full-on school year plans to get a broader idea of how long each lesson or activity will take, so you can map out the entire year's instruction either for your own use or for a grade level team. Google Sheets also works in conjunction with Google Forms. So when you create a Google form and you go over to the responses area, you can create a Google Sheet that is tied to that Google form. This is a Google Sheet that will track information about using a bathroom pass. Students will select their name and then their designation for when they go to the restroom. From a Google form, Google Sheets will automatically add a timestamp and put the valid information for any of the options that were in the Google form. Google Sheets can also be used to create pixel art or art that is used with a grid pattern. You can use conditional formatting to create different colors for specific codes, numbers, or letters. In this case, if you put in any of the letters that are up on the top, it's going to color code those blocks where students can create pixel pictures. This can be used with fractions or area. This particular pixel art template can be found at Control-Alt-Achieve by Eric Kurtz. Another way Google Sheets can be used with filtering is if you create a Google Sheet for each module of a specific unit in math or in reading, and you can take a pre-test and post-test and compare that information. You can also log the different math problems by standard, so that way you can use this percent filter and you can select any students that have a lower average, which allows you to pull those specific students for intervention groups. There's also a great resource called flippity.net. If you go to flippity.net, it uses information from Google Spreadsheets to create a variety of tools. I'm going to create a Flippity random name picker. All you have to do is make a copy of the template by clicking on template. You're going to want to replace the given information with your own information. And on the second tab of the sheet, it's going to tell you what directions you need to follow in order to get to that feature. You're going to want to go to File and publish this to the web. Select Publish. It's going to create a code right here. If you follow this code into a brand new tab, the information will be pulled in from that Google Sheet into this random name picker that will allow you to create different objects and items using Google Sheets and flippity.net. That is just a few different options for how you can use Google Sheets in a classroom. I hope you come up with some of your own ideas, and thank you so much for joining us today for this Google Sheets training.